You are listening to Chats with Chumi, a heartfelt exploration of the challenges and victories found in the intersection of motherhood, faith, and mental health. Today we are going to be talking about breastfeeding. Together we'll navigate this journey courageously, untangling the complex tapestry of nurturing life, drawing strength from our shared faith, and striving for mental well-being. Join us as we foster an empowering space for honesty, growth, and connection, one meaningful conversation at a time. Hi Heather, how are you?
Good, lovely to be with you.
Thank you so much, Heather, and thank you so much for coming back. It's been amazing getting to know you. I know a bit about you now. So, I want us to talk about latching because that's the first thing you do when breastfeeding. How do I know that my baby's latching?
So your baby's latching if they're attached to the breast and they're suckling at the breast.
Yes.
And it feels comfortable. And they need to be suckling in a rhythm. There's a rhythm that happens. If a baby's just going tuk 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 and they're not doing anything and then tuk tuk tuk, that's not really feeding. Feeding is it's a big jaw movement. The baby's moving their jaw and they're not slipping off the breast and they're not pinching the nipple. So pain is really important to notice. And if it's painful when the baby's attached at the breast and drinking at the breast, then we're not latched correctly.
Okay.
And what happens then is the nipple becomes badly damaged. And so breastfeeding becomes really painful for the mom.
Yes.
And the baby doesn't access the milk very well. Because if it's pinching, then you can be sure that the baby's tongue is in the wrong place. And if the baby's tongue's not in the right place, they're not accessing the milk well. So correct latching, you can tell by it being comfortable.
Okay.
So it's pretty easy. So I can't tell a good latch. And mom will often say, is this a good latch? And I won't tell her it's a good latch. I'll ask her, does it feel comfortable?
Okay.
And if she says it feels comfortable, then it doesn't matter what it looks like.
Yes. Okay.
I know that it's a good latch.
Okay. Okay, that makes sense. What are the advantages and the disadvantages of breastfeeding?
So the advantages are that human milk is the best milk for babies.
Okay.
You know, in the same way that baby cows grow best from their mother's milk, human babies grow best from their mother's milk.
Yes.
And our breast milk has antibodies in it. So these are organisms that actually fight infection and prevent infection.
Okay.
So particularly gut and respiratory tract infections, breastfed babies tend to have fewer of them. You know, the sense of bonding. And I don't think that that's a given. It's a bonding experience if a mother is enjoying breastfeeding, and she'll be enjoying breastfeeding if her baby's gaining beautifully.
Yes.
And if she doesn't spend 8 hours a day breastfeeding. You know, it's also about time. It's lovely to spend time breastfeeding, but a breastfeed shouldn't take much more than half an hour. And we're doing it every 3 hours, so it's a pretty intense activity.
So, like, it shouldn't take half an hour. That's like per breast or just
roughly 15 minutes per breast. So I'm saying half an hour in total. Once you get good at it, it shouldn't take much longer than that. I sometimes have moms who spend well over an hour, 8 times a day breastfeeding, and that's generally less fun. So the breastfeeding should be comfortable, and it shouldn't take hours and hours. It should get quite efficient. But in terms of the advantages of breastfeeding, just going back to the bonding, if a breastfeed is a pleasurable activity and it takes, you know, half an hour, sometimes less, and the baby loves the breast, and there are hormones that get released when you breastfeed that really can make a mom feel wonderful. And if your baby's growing, you're watching your baby growing so beautifully, all from your body, that is quite a magnificent feeling of like, I'm growing my baby and I'm watching my baby grow in front of me. So those are the things that make breastfeeding wonderful. But I have women who spend so much time breastfeeding their babies, and their babies aren't gaining weight well, or their babies fuss at the breast and cry at the breast. or the baby's the latching is really painful and her nipples are sore.
Yes.
And some women get blocked ducts or mastitis, breast infections. So I'm just saying that there are problems that we encounter and hurdles with breastfeeding that can make it not fun at all. So bonding is not a given. If breastfeeding's going well,
yes,
and a mom is enjoying breastfeeding, then
Yes.
it's a bonding experience. And it's the very opposite if it's not going well at all.
yes,
So I don't think that's a given. But if one can breastfeed and one can enjoy breastfeeding,
yeah,
then it's absolutely wonderful. It's one of the biggest joys in having a baby.
yes,
And that feeling of like there's nobody else that can do this for my baby is quite special and makes you feel very special.
yes,
But it can also, the flip side of that, it can feel like I'm entirely responsible for my baby's nutrition, and if my baby's not gaining well, it's all my fault, and if my baby's uncomfortable, it's my fault.
yes.
So it can be quite overwhelming and painful for a woman, and soul destroying for a woman if it's not going well.
Yeah, also my follow-up question to that was how to deal with disappointments when breastfeeding, because I know that breastfeeding can be hard.
So I think the important thing is it makes a big difference to have a supportive partner. And I express a lot to my dads that it's so important that they communicate with their partners how important it is that their partner is okay. Because all men would like their babies to be breastfed because they know that breast milk is best for their babies.
Yes.
And the mum knows that too, that her partner wants her to breastfeed. But I think it's so important that men communicate to their partners, I'll help you persevere and I'll do everything I can to help you. But I do want you to know that your well-being is much more important to me than whether our baby is breastfed. And that conversation needs to happen not just once. It's a bit like I love you.
Yes.
You can't say I love you once and think that she's going to think you believe that for the rest of your life. It's something you have to say a few times.
Yes.
So I think partner support makes a big difference. And I often have the dads coming to the lactation consultations because I'm only with a mum for one feed that day.
Yes.
The dad is going to be with the mum for the other 6 or 7 feeds that she does.
Yes.
And the dad's input is so valuable. So having a supportive partner, supportive emotionally, but also in terms of coming to those clinic visits and engaging actively in helping the baby latch correctly at the breast. That is really important. And then, of course, getting the right help.
Yes.
So seeing someone, and what does the right help look like? Because some lactation specialists can be very fanatical about breastfeeding.
Okay.
And so in my opinion, we don't breastfeed at all costs. What's so much more important is the mum's well-being.
Yes.
If one is under-resourced, then paying for formula can actually be really, really tricky, and you really need to persevere with the breastfeeding. In a first world middle class context, most families can afford to buy good formula. So that's also an issue. There's the cost of formula feeding a baby, whereas breast milk is free. So getting the right support in terms of your partner or family if you don't have a partner, and then getting the right support in terms of expertise and a lactation consultant.
Okay.
I think we often, nurses are expected to know a lot about breastfeeding, and most nurses actually don't know very much about breastfeeding. It is a speciality.
Yes.
So maybe they can help with the basics, but if you're having problems, then you ideally need to find a lactation consultant. And if you just go on the internet and look up, there's lists of lactation consultants, and you just need to find one in your area.
Is there a routine when breastfeeding, and what does that look like?
In the beginning, there's no routine because, the first 3 days you've got colostrum, which is very small amounts of milk. It's very rich milk. It's got lots of antibodies. So it's very important for the baby to get, but it comes in very small quantities. And so they will feed often, every hour or 2 or 3 or 4.
Okay.
In those first 3 days. And they lose weight in those first 3 days because it's such small volumes of milk, but it just keeps their energy up until your volume of milk increases. And we say that the term we use is your milk comes in on day 3 to day 6. It's not really an accurate term because you have already got milk, but certainly the milk volume increases.
Yes.
And quite dramatically usually. And so that becomes a bit of like a buffet, you know, it's the baby's just drinking often because they're super hungry because they've been losing weight for 3 days and they should be really hungry.
Yes.
And your breasts should be really relieved by the frequent feeding because your breasts get very full those 3 days. And then by then it settles down a little bit. And so if the baby's gaining weight well, then we expect them to be back to their birth weight. As I said, they lose weight. And a baby who's feeding well is back to their birth weight by 2 weeks. And I wouldn't look at having a routine at all until your baby's back to birth weight.
Yes.
We just assume that every rooting around behavior is hunger in the beginning.
Definitely.
And we want them pooing lots and weeing lots. And that obviously tells us on a sort of, you know, feed by feed basis that the baby's getting plenty to drink if they're weeing and pooing nicely. And the baby should be contented after a feed. If a baby sleeps at the breast and then fusses when they come off the breast, that baby is not drinking well.
Okay.
That's a very strong sign that a baby's not drinking well. If a baby's munching at the breast and then is comatose afterwards, we call it a milk coma, where they're just like...
Oh, there's even a term for it.
There's a term for it. We call it milk drunk or milk coma, and they're supposed to just be like, at the end of a feed. So those are some of the signs that tell us our baby's doing well. But the really most important one is to weigh your baby.
Yeah.
So we weigh them at 1 week. We weigh them at 2 weeks. Hopefully they're back to birth at 2 weeks.
Yes.
And if they are gaining weight beautifully, then we can start settling into a rhythm. And I would say that rhythm is going to look something between 2 and 4 hourly, and most commonly around 3 hourly feeds.
Okay.
And then we stop waking them up at night once they're back to birth weight. There's no need to wake them up at night. They will wake you, but we're not going to set an alarm and wake them at night.
Yeah.
And if you're lucky, they'll go a little bit longer, 4 or 5 hours at night if you're very lucky.
Yeah.
Knowing laughter.
Yeah. How do I know if I have enough milk? And also, how do I then increase my milk supply if it's not enough?
That's a lovely question. So day 3 to day 6 is really important. If you don't feel any change in your breasts between day 3 and day 6, there's a problem.
Okay, what kind of change?
So the change is that your breasts become larger, and the milk, you can see the milk coming out more. But it's more a sense of a fullness, sometimes a hardness, and it's really important that that hardness and fullness is softened by the baby feeding. So kind of like that feeling when you have a full bladder. And you get that sense of my bladder's full and it needs to be relieved.
Yes.
It's the same with your breasts.
I know that.
Yes,
feeling.
you know that feeling. So when your baby's been suckling at the breast, you should have that empty bladder feeling, like that sense of relief. Oh, that feels good. And then the breasts fill up again. So day 3 to day 6 is quite important in terms of reading whether your milk is coming in nicely. And if it's not, then your baby should be very cross. If day 3 to day 6 your baby's not getting enough milk, they have one of two responses.
They get really frustrated.
They get hangry. I don't know if you know the term hangry, but that's hungry and angry at the same time. The other response, which is less helpful, is that they can get very sleepy. And so I do have babies that aren't weeing and pooing and they seem very contented and they're just sleeping at the breast. That is a baby we would worry about. So that's why it's so important to weigh them on day 7 and check that they have gained weight since they left the hospital. Then in terms of how do you know that you've got enough milk, it's definitely that weight gain. We sort of aim for babies to gain about 30 grams a day in those early weeks. So we're looking at their weight gain, we're looking at their contentment, and their wheeze and their poos.
Yeah.
But weight gain is really important.
Okay, that's the most important one.
It's an objective.
Okay.
I do sometimes have babies that are pooing up a storm and they're not gaining weight. So they are generally, if a baby's pooing up a storm, then you know that they're drinking well. But every now and then the scale doesn't lie. That's the thing.
Yeah.
So it is important to weigh them in the beginning. How would you increase your milk supply?
Yes.
By feeding more often.
Okay.
So the more often your breast is emptied, the more milk you will make. Because every time your breast is emptied, messages go to the brain to say, need to make some more milk, hungry baby. If you've got a baby who's sleeping at the breast and they're not actually extracting the milk from the breast, no messages go to the brain to say make more milk.
Okay.
And so in fact what can happen is you can get a secondary low supply because the baby's not taking the milk out of the breast.
Okay.
So every now and then I have a baby who doesn't drink well at the breast. They might be suckling quite a bit, but they're not actually extracting the milk from the breast. And then we have to pump that milk out to keep a mom's milk supply good. Otherwise, because if the milk's not coming out of the breast, it's not going to be made. So, and in terms of increasing your milk supply, there's a lot of myths around that as well.
So many
myths. And also, parents are a marketer's dream. You can sell anything to a parent if you say the baby's going to, you're going to make more milk. You get lactation cookies and all sorts of herbs and yeast and beer and all sorts of things that promise to make lots of milk. But in actual fact, what's most important is your baby latching correctly, is your baby drinking the milk well, and are you feeding often enough?
Yeah.
So sometimes you will add an extra feed or two into the day just to get that milk supply up.
Okay.
And if you feed more often today, you will have an increased milk supply in roughly 2 days. So there's a lag between placing the order by feeding more often and the milk being delivered, as it were. So there's a little bit of a lag time. So if I feed often today, I will have more milk in a couple of days. But it's not immediate.
Okay, I didn't know that. Thank you. I had a tough time breastfeeding.
Did you?
Yes, but I hope that next time it will be better. It will be better. Is there an appropriate time to wean baby off breast milk? And also, are there any methods around doing that?
That's a lovely question. So weaning is an interesting term because we talk about weaning onto solids.
Yes.
And then we talk about weaning off the breast.
Yes.
So we're talking now about weaning off the breast.
Yes.
How long should you breastfeed for? Well, you breastfeed for as long as mom and baby are enjoying it.
Yes.
And it's working for both of them. It's a two-person activity.
Okay.
I have moms who are loving breastfeeding and the baby's like, hey, I'm done. Thank you. I'm out of here. And I have moms who are who want to stop breastfeeding. They just feel like I need my body back, and the baby is just so attached to the breast, and it's very difficult to get them to stop. Yeah. And it seems rare that mom and baby come to the conclusion that they both like to stop at the same time. Yes. So there's usually a little bit of argy-bargy about one person being more keen to stop than the other. But in terms of what babies need in terms of milk, they are only needing milk for the first 4 months.
Okay.
Between 4 and 5 months, we start letting them taste food that we're eating. And by 6 months, they should actually be eating quite a lot of food. Okay. And by 6 months, they're usually eating about 3 meals a day and they're drinking quite a lot less milk.
So at about 4 months, you start introducing solids.
Between 4 and 5 months, we start letting them taste food and play with food.
Okay.
I talk about that rather than introduce solids because that sounds like a very serious thing and like we need to make purees. And I don't start off like that. I just start letting them taste little things that we're eating, putting some peanut butter on their hands, anything that you want them to taste, you put on their fingers because they put
I love how you're putting it because Also, when I was told to start introducing solids to Olu, so in my head, it was that whole thing of, okay, I have to make a puree. You have to do this. You have to do this. And the experience was Olu was tasting at the time.
Yeah, we just do tasting in the beginning. But the point there about the breastfeeding is that between 4 and 6 months of age, as they start being introduced to food as well, they do drink less milk. The more food they eat, the less milk they drink. And we start introducing water to drink once they're starting to eat solids as well, so they can have sips of water as well. So they are not exclusively milk fed beyond 4 months. So for some moms, and a lot of moms are going back to work at 4 months. And so for some moms, they feel like some moms find it very difficult to express at work. It is possible to express at work when you normally would have fed and give that milk to your baby the next day. So I do have moms who continue to exclusively breast milk feed.
Okay.
Their babies don't go onto formula. But those are the moms who are enjoying it, and they've got a space to pump, and they've got a good pump, and it's working for them. But for a lot of women, it just becomes that juggling too much. I'm working full time and I'm parenting full time, and I'm not getting a lot of sleep at night, and it can all be too much. So sometimes something has to give. And then I have moms who are still breastfeeding their babies well into their second year of life, and everyone's enjoying it. So basically, I would say wean when either mom or baby is not enjoying it anymore.
Okay.
And so that and it can vary. It can, some moms, I have moms who wanted to breastfeed for a year, and they hit hurdles, and by 6 weeks we're calling it a day, because it's been really difficult, and we've tried everything and it's still not fun.
I love it when you say that, when mommy or baby is not enjoying, because I never thought of baby not enjoying.
Some babies are very uncomfortable at the breast and do have issues, or they really don't drink well at the breast, and so they find it quite a stressful experience. Or because we're needing to give bottles because we're going back to work, they can take a preference to a bottle, because the breast you have to work quite hard at, whereas a bottle can be very easy to drink from. And some babies just love the comfort of the breast, and they'll always choose the breast first. And some babies really won't take a bottle because they object to not having their mom. So there are lots of different scenarios that one is faced with. It's not always straightforward. But in terms of your question about weaning, do your best to breastfeed as exclusively as you can for the first 4 months. If it's working well for you and your baby, and then keep continuing until one of you's not enjoying it anymore.
Yeah, I think that's what happened between me and Olu. I just said I was not enjoying breastfeeding, but I think he also did not enjoy it anymore.
So you came to the same conclusion at the same time?
He went himself off at 7 months.
Okay.
But I was like, okay.
And it was okay with you? So
yes. It was really okay with me, because my breastfeeding journey was difficult. So I was like, okay.
Another important point that I'll make is that it doesn't matter how much you want to stop breastfeeding. When you stop breastfeeding, there's a grieving process, and there's a sense of loss. And I have a lot of moms who are quite surprised.
You miss it sometimes.
They're surprised with how sad they feel, because for a lot of moms, it feels like saying goodbye to that beautiful newborn baby stage. It feels like my baby doesn't need me so much anymore, and I really wanted my body back, but I also miss it. So I would just say expect to feel ambivalent. I think ambivalence is a big issue around weaning.
Yes.
It's always sad. So be okay with being a little bit sad, even if you thought it was what you really wanted.
Yeah, it's okay.
Being a mom is complicated. There's a lot of complicated, contradictory feelings that have to live side by side.
There's a lot going on.
Yeah.
Is formula good enough as breastfeeding, as breast milk?
So formula is designed to be as close to breast milk as possible. And there's a whole lot of things that we can't put in formula that is in breast milk, that we can't manufacture. But babies grow very well on formula.
Okay.
And what is required is you need safe water, and you need some way of sterilizing your equipment and not contaminating it. And also, of course, milk can go off. So you've got to make sure that you don't leave milk out of the fridge or keep giving milk. You know, if you've got a massive big bottle, you can't just keep giving that bottle all throughout the day because it'll grow germs. So one's got to be really aware of how quickly germs grow in milk.
How long should I keep the milk for? So
we usually make milk up. So you'll see the tins are always a little bit suspicious because they tell you what volumes to give your baby, and the volumes are not very accurate. So we go by the weight of the baby rather than the age of the baby. Okay. But it's also about the concentration of the milk. Yes. So when you are giving milk, it's really important that you give it at the right volume of water to the right amount of powder. Okay. So if it's 60 mils per scoop, then you must give 60 mils of cooled boiled water and 1 scoop. And you can't make it more concentrated or diluted. You know, I think a problem where finances are tight is that we end up putting less milk powder in the same amount of water, and then babies aren't getting enough calories. So that would be an issue there. You must make it at the right concentration. And on the tin, it also says that you must you first put the water in and then put the powder in. You ideally want the water to cool down a little bit, not too hot. And then you just shake it and give it. You can actually make it in advance, 24 hours in advance, but you wouldn't leave it in the fridge made up for much longer than 24 hours. Okay. But like if you were going out, you would put your sterile water, which is your boiled water, in the bottle. Yes. And then you'd have the powder. You get these little containers, and you would just scoop out, say you needed 3 scoops. You put your 3 scoops in that little container, sealed container. And when you need to give the milk to your baby, say 3 hours later, then you just put the powder in as you making it up. Okay. Rather than pre-mixing it, because as soon as you mix the powder in with the water, germs are going to start growing. Oh. Whereas if you've got that sterile water separate from the powder, then you can carry it around with you all day. And you only just add the powder in as you're going to feed your baby. So those are just a couple of tips in terms of keeping the milk safe and making sure that it doesn't grow germs and babies don't get sick from that. Yes.
Can my baby be allergic to breast milk, and why?
It's not common, but there are babies who don't tolerate the protein in the breast milk, and they can get really uncomfortable. But it's very uncommon. It's called cow's milk protein allergy. Yes. And moms, sometimes it does help if the mom restricts her diet in some ways. I'm not a big fan of moms cutting things out of their diet without some professional advice. Yes. So I'm not a fan of a fussy baby and the mother's told to exclude eggs and dairy and wheat and nuts. I'm not a big fan of that at all, because then we take out a lot of really healthy food out of a mom's diet without really knowing that we need to. Yeah. So I would get expert help if you've got a particularly fussy baby who screams at the breast even though there's lots of milk. They tend to be very uncomfortable feeding, and they often are not growing very well because they're too uncomfortable to feed. Okay. But it's rare. It's not common. Okay.
What is colic? Is there a cure for colic?
So colic, as none of us really know. It's not a scientific term. Yes. But colic is really about a baby who is more uncomfortable than we expect. Yes. And we expect babies to be uncomfortable. If you think about it, their gut is they're born with a gut that is completely clean. Our gut as adults, as humans, we have more organisms in our gut than we have cells in our body. Oh. And that's called our microbiome. And those organisms, bacteria and all sorts of other things in our gut, they help us digest our food, and they help protect our gut and line it and be part of our immune system. Yeah. So if you think about a baby being born with this clean gut, they haven't got all that microbiome. Okay. And it takes a number of weeks for that microbiome to develop and for them to be able to digest the food better. Okay. So it is understandable that those first roughly 12 weeks, babies are quite uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And it tends to start between 2 and 3 weeks that I notice that babies get much more wakeful. They usually just feed and sleep the first couple of weeks. Call that the honeymoon. That gives you enough time just to get the breastfeeding kind of on top of the breastfeeding and that going well. And then between 2 and 3 weeks, babies tend to get a lot more windy and uncomfortable. Lots of kind of sounds and pulling up their legs and lots of farts and burps and just general discomfort. And that peaks at about 6 weeks. So 3 to 6 weeks, they can be quite fussy. And then should start getting better by 12 weeks. They're usually much more comfy. And what are the things that help? The things that help are holding your baby, jiggling your baby. Sucking is very soothing for a baby because the sucking helps. You know, your gut is like a conveyor belt, and if you're sucking at the top, it moves the conveyor belt, and the poops and the winds come out the other end, and that helps with the cramps as well. So sucking is enormously comforting, and the baby doesn't have to suckle and get more milk at the breast just after a feed, but they can suckle on a dummy, which can be very soothing for them. We don't give a dummy to a hungry baby. We feed a hungry baby, but that interim period of, you know, an hour to 2 hours, 2.5 hours after a feed, that's a really good time to give the baby a dummy to suck on to help with those winds and cramps. And swaddling, just containing them, makes them feel super safe. We call this proprioception. You know, when you hugged, and that pressure on their bodies that comes from being held or swaddled is very comforting.
Those exercises that you like?
I kind of do bicycle movements with their legs. I lie them in my lap and I lift up their legs and push their legs into their tummy. And that can help them get their winds out as well.
Because Olu had colic for over 6 months. It was for 6 months and 2 weeks. I was counting because I couldn't wait for it to end. And it was so strong. Hence, I did not give up on breastfeeding. Like you mentioned, that sucking helps. So I had to do it.
That's a very long time to have a colicky baby.
It
usually does get better sooner than that. But even 12 weeks, when you kind of 3 or 4 weeks in, 12 weeks can seem like a very long time away. And, you know, the thing is that there are some colic mixtures and there's some medications that the doctor can give you that might help. But the thing that you really need is support. So you need more than one pair of arms to carry that baby because those babies are hard to put down. And so baby wearing is enormously helpful because then you've got your hands free. And that's why I get the dads helping a lot. And it's a lovely way for the dads to bond with the babies. If they get good at settling the baby, I kind of see the moms do the breastfeeding and the dads can be very helpful getting the breastfeeding established. But once that's established, then the moms are doing the breastfeeding and the dads tend to take the babies after the feed and settle the babies, take them for walks, wear them in the wrap. My dads just love to wear their babies in a wrap. You can even do skin to skin for the dads if they're feeling like they need to connect with their baby or they're worried that they're not going to fall in love with their baby. Skin to skin contact. Always have a nappy on the baby, but just popping that baby down your shirt and carrying the baby.
They recommend skin to skin when babies born
for moms
and for dads.
I mean, why wouldn't you? It's just so delicious. They're so lovely to cuddle and just to have nothing between you. You know, clothing can get in the way. So skin to skin for moms and dads is beneficial.
Thank you so much. So in closing, I'd like to know what role has motherhood played in your life?
Well, I always wanted to be a mama. I think a lot of us have this longing to be a mom and wondering what kind of mom you will be and what kind of children you'll have. So it's a bit of an adventure, and just that sense of having a family and having that support and raising children as a family is just a big dream that many of us have. And sometimes some of it is a fantasy. and I've found parenting to be the most humbling of career choices. So if you're aiming for perfection, then parenting's not the route to go because parenting's all about relationships and relationships are complex. So I would say I've been sufficiently humbled, but maybe that's why I have so much empathy and care, and I really want to nurture new families, because we do need a lot of care and support.
Yes.
But it's a huge privilege to be a parent, and you kind of join this kind of elite group that you didn't know you were excluded from.
Yeah, definitely it is humbling. It is humbling and such a beautiful journey. Yeah. And that's it for today. As we conclude today's episodes of Chats with Chumi, we hope you continue carrying these insights into your daily dance of faith, motherhood, and mental health. If you found value in our conversation, please share with others who may benefit. Like our episode and subscribe to continue journeying with us, one heartfelt conversation at a time.